How could something so beautiful, so enticing, lead to ruin? A golden cool face pendant, a treasure that promised wealth, became a curse that destroyed everything. This is the story of Kelechi, his friends, and the dark shadow that followed them after they defied the spirits of the land. You won't believe what happened next. It all started as a celebration. Kelechi and his friends, Zubair, Amara, and others from Lagos State University, had worked hard for months. Their final exam was behind them, and their professor had arranged a cultural field trip to Ogundele, a small but historic village renowned for its traditions and spiritual practices. To the students, it was just another excursion. To the village elders, it was something sacred. The group arrived in Ogundele on a sunny Friday morning. The village welcomed them with open arms, the chief even hosting them for a tour of his palace. Among the artifacts they saw, one stood out, a golden uku face pendant, placed on a pedestal in the center of a room filled with ancient carvings and statues. The pendant shone so brightly it was hard to look at directly. "This pendant is the pride of our ancestors," said the chief, his voice calm but commanding. "It is more than gold, it is protected by the spirits of our land. No one can take it without invoking their wrath." But as the chief spoke, Kelechi's eyes were locked on the pendant. He whispered to Zubair, "Do you know how much that pendant could sell for? We'd be rich for life." Zubair laughed nervously. "Kelechi, are you crazy? Didn't you hear the chief? It's cursed." Kelechi shrugged. "Curses are just old wives' tales." The next few days passed quickly. The students took pictures, explored the village, and immersed themselves in its culture. But Kelechi couldn't stop thinking about the pendant. Each night he dreamed of it, of its glow, of the life it could give him. He wasn't alone. Zubair and Amara were tempted too, but fear kept them from acting. On the last night of the trip, while the village slept, Kelechi made his move. "If you're too scared, stay behind," he told Zubair and Amara. "But if you want to be rich, follow me." The trio sneaked out of their guest house, their footsteps muffled by the cool night air. Inside the palace, the pendant shimmered, almost as if it were alive. Kelechi grabbed it, ignoring the chill that ran down his spine. Amara whispered, "This feels wrong, Kelechi. Let's put it back." "Too late," he replied, stuffing the pendant into his backpack. "We're going to be millionaires." The next morning, the students boarded their bus to leave Ogundel. The villagers waved goodbye, their smiles masking a deeper understanding. The elders knew someone had stolen the pendant. They always did. But the spirits would handle it. As the bus rolled out of the village, laughter filled the air. Kelechi sat at the back, his bag clutched tightly, his mind racing with thoughts of the riches awaiting him in Lagos. But as the miles passed, the mood shifted. First, the bus broke down in the middle of nowhere. The driver tinkered with the engine under the blazing sun, while the students fanned themselves and grumbled. Hours later, a tire burst. The students began to grow uneasy, and Amara whispered to Zubair, "Do you think this has anything to do with the pendant?" Before Zubair could answer, the unthinkable happened. The brakes failed, and the bus careened off the road, flipping into a ditch. Screams filled the air. When the dust settled, 3 students were dead, and many others were injured. Kelechi survived with only a few scratches. As he stumbled from the wreckage, clutching his bag, he couldn't shake the feeling that the pendant was watching him. When Kelechi arrived home, things went from bad to worse. His younger sister, Chiamaka, slept in the bathroom that evening and hit her head. She died instantly. The family was devastated. Days later, Kelechi's father, a strong and healthy man, fell mysteriously ill. His body stiffened and he could no longer speak. Kelechi's mother called a local diviner who arrived with grave news. Someone in this house has brought a curse upon you, the diviner said. Until the source of the curse is returned, this family will know no peace. Kelechi trembled but said nothing. How could he admit that his greed had caused all this? That night, Kelechi woke to the sound of whispers. Shadows moved across his bedroom walls. His sister's voice called out to him, Kelechi, why did you do this? He turned to see her ghostly figure standing at the foot of his bed, her eyes hollow and her face pale. The next day, invisible spirits began to appear, their whips cracking through the air. Only Kelechi could see them, and each lash left a mark on his back. Return the pendant, they chanted. Return what you have stolen. Desperate, Kelechi packed his bag and began the long journey back to Ogundele. The road back to the village was treacherous. Each step felt heavier than the last, and the pendant seemed to grow heavier in his bag. Ghostly apparitions followed him, whispering his name. The spirits lashed him mercilessly, their voices echoing in his ears. Kelechi's journey back to the village was only the beginning of his redemption or his downfall. What awaited him at the village gates was beyond anything he could imagine. Kelechi trudged along the dusty road, his legs weak and trembling. Each step felt like lifting a mountain, the pendant in his bag weighing heavier with every passing hour. The whispers of his sister Chiamaka echoed in his ears. Return the pendant, Kelechi, or we'll never be free. The sun blazed overhead, but Kelechi felt no warmth, only an eerie chill that clung to his skin like a second layer. Along the way, he tried hitching a ride, but no driver stopped. To them, he looked like a madman. His clothes torn, his face streaked with sweat and dust, and his eyes wild with fear. In the distance, Kelechi heard drums. They were faint at first, but as he moved closer, they grew louder, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw them, the spirits. Tall and imposing, their colorful garments seemed to ripple even though there was no wind. Return what you stole, their voices boomed, shaking the earth beneath him. The first whip struck his back, and Kelechi stumbled forward, clutching his bag tighter. He screamed in pain, but he couldn't stop. He knew the spirits wouldn't rest until he brought the crown back to the village. As night fell, Kelechi collapsed under a baobab tree, gasping for breath. His back throbbed where the invisible whips had struck him, and his vision blurred with exhaustion. He reached for his water bottle, only to find it empty. Suddenly, a voice cut through the darkness. You look like you've been running from death itself. Kelechi looked up to see an old man standing before him, leaning on a cane. His eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, and his presence felt otherworldly. I need to get to Ogundele, Kelechi croaked. The old man nodded knowingly. You carry a heavy burden, boy? The pendant calls to me. It seeks to return to its rightful place. Kelechi's heart pounded. How do you know about the pendant? The man chuckled, a sound that sent chills down Kelechi's spine. I know many things, but be warned. The spirits are not as forgiving as you hope. They will demand their price, even if you return it. I'll do whatever it takes, Keleki whispered, tears streaming down his face. I just want my family to be free. The old man handed him a small gourd filled with water. Drink. You'll need your strength. The road ahead is long, and the spirits are watching. After 2 grueling days, Kelechi finally reached the gates of Ogundele. His body was broken, his feet blistered, his back raw from the lashes, and his mind teetering on the edge of collapse. The villagers were waiting. Word had spread that the thief was returning. The chief stood at the gates, flanked by his elders and palace guards. Behind them, the villagers gathered in silence, their faces a mixture of anger, curiosity, and pity. Kelechi dropped to his knees, his hands trembling as he unwrapped the pendant. Its golden surface seemed to glow brighter in the village's presence, as if it recognized its home. Forgive me, Kelechi sobbed, placing the pendant at the chief's feet. I was blinded by greed. I didn't know. The chief stared at Kelechi, his expression unreadable. You have brought great sorrow upon yourself and your family. The spirits do not forgive easily. Their price has already been paid in blood. Kelechi's heart sank. He thought of Kiamaka's laughter, now silenced forever. He thought of his father, strong and proud, now reduced to a shadow of himself. As the chief picked up the pendant, the air grew heavy. A low rumble echoed through the village, and the ground began to shake. The villagers gasped and stepped back as a thick mist rolled in, obscuring the sun. From the mist emerged the spirits, taller and more menacing than ever. Their voices thundered. The thief has returned the pendant, but his debt is not yet paid. Kelechi's body trembled. Please, I've done what you asked. Let my family go. The chief raised his hand. Spirits! He has returned what he stole. What more do you demand? The spirits were silent for a moment, their whips hanging in the air. Then the spirit leader stepped forward, towering over Kelechi. His soul is marked. He must carry the burden of his greed forever. Before Kelechi could respond, the spirit struck his chest with the butt of its whip. A searing pain shot through his body, and he collapsed to the ground. When Kelechi awoke, the villagers were gone, and the mist had cleared. The pendant was back on its pedestal in the palace, its glow dimmer but still commanding. The chief knelt beside him, his face somber. You are free to leave, but your life will never be the same. The spirits have marked you. Wherever you go, they will follow. Kelechi staggered to his feet, his body aching and his mind heavy with regret. As he left the village, he couldn't shake the feeling that invisible eyes were watching him. Kelechi walked for hours, unsure of where to go. He couldn't return home, not after what he had caused. The road stretched endlessly before him, and the shadows seemed to move with him. Then from behind him, a familiar voice whispered, Kelechi. It was Chiamaka. Kelechi froze at the sound of Chiamaka's voice. Turning slowly, he saw her standing in the distance, her figure faint and shimmering like a mirage. Her hollow eyes bore into his soul, and her voice carried the weight of sorrow. You thought you could run from your guilt, Kelechi, she whispered, but you cannot escape what you've done. The spirits demand more than just the pendant. They demand your reckoning. Tears streamed down Kelechi's face. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was foolish, blinded by greed. Chiamaka stepped closer, her expression softening. It is not too late, Kelechi. You must face the spirits and accept their judgment fully. Only then will you find peace. With trembling hands, Kelechi knelt on the road, his body weak, but his resolve strong. What must I do? He asked. The shadows around him thickened, and the familiar drums of the spirits filled the air. This time, their presence felt less menacing, as if they were waiting for his choice. Offer your soul to the spirits, Chiamaka said gently, not in death, but in servitude. Walk the earth as a keeper of the balance, ensuring no one else repeats your mistakes. Kelechi nodded, his heart heavy but resolute. I will do whatever it takes to make amends. The spirits encircled Kelechi, their voices harmonizing in an otherworldly chant. The air grew still as the spirit leader stepped forward again, its whip raised high. Instead of striking, it placed the whip on Kelechi's shoulders like a mantle. You are now bound to us, the spirit said. Your life will no longer be your own. You will serve as a warning to others, a living testament to the cost of greed and the sanctity of tradition. A blinding light engulfed Kelechi, and when it faded, he found himself alone on the road. The pendant's weight in his bag was gone, but in its place was a small talisman, a mark of his new role. Years passed, and Kelechi became a wanderer, visiting villages and towns across the land. He shared his story with anyone who would listen, warning them of the dangers of greed and the power of tradition. The talisman glowed faintly whenever he spoke, and those who heard his tale felt the spirit's presence, urging them to heed his words. Though Kelechi's life was no longer his own, he found peace in his purpose. The spirits no longer tormented him, and his family, free from the curse, began to rebuild their lives. Kelechi's story became a legend, told by elders to children as a cautionary tale. The moral was clear. Greed blinds us to the consequences of our actions. Traditions and beliefs are not to be dismissed, for they carry the wisdom of generations. Redemption is possible, but it comes with a price. And sometimes the path to forgiveness is through service to others. Kelechi's journey reminds us that our choices have ripple effects far beyond what we can see, and respecting the unseen forces of the world is not weakness, it is wisdom. And so ends the story of Kelechi and the stolen pendant, a tale of greed, loss, and ultimately redemption. We hope you've learned something valuable from this hunting journey. Let Kelechi's story serve as a reminder to always think carefully about the choices we make and the traditions we choose to respect or ignore. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating tales from the heart of Africa. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.